Dr. Maya Richardson rubbed her tired eyes as she pulled her sleek black suitcase through the revolving doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The magnificent crystal chandelier sparkled above her head, casting warm light across the marble floors of the opulent lobby. After a grueling 14-hour flight from London, where she had been giving a guest lecture at Oxford Medical School, all she wanted was to check in and rest before tomorrow's keynote speech at the International Neurosurgery Conference. The 35-year-old surgeon had grown accustomed to staying in luxury hotels during her speaking engagements, but the Grand Plaza was special. Its presidential suite, which the conference organizers had booked for her, was famous for hosting world leaders and celebrities. Despite her exhaustion, Maya couldn't help but smile, thinking about how far she had come from her humble beginnings in South Chicago. She was wearing comfortable travel clothes, black yoga pants, a loose-fitting white blouse, and her favorite pair of Nike sneakers. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore minimal makeup after the long flight. Her hospital ID badge still hung around her neck, as she hadn't bothered to remove it after leaving London's medical center. The lobby was busy with the evening rush of check-ins. Maya noticed several other guests being warmly greeted by the staff, a white couple in expensive suits being directed to the executive lounge, an elderly man getting assistance with his bags, and a family of tourists receiving recommendations for local restaurants. As she approached the front desk, Maya observed a woman in her late 40s, wearing a navy blue blazer with a name tag that read Karen Whitmore, front desk manager. Karen was speaking to another employee and laughing, but her expression changed dramatically when she spotted Maya walking toward the desk. Before Maya could reach the counter, Karen quickly stepped out from behind it, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she approached with an expression that Maya had seen too many times before in her life. "Excuse me," Karen said loudly, her voice carrying across the lobby. "This is a private establishment. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Maya blinked in surprise, her hand instinctively tightening around the handle of her suitcase. Several nearby guests turned to watch the interaction, and she could feel their eyes on her. "There must be some misunderstanding," Maya replied calmly, reaching for her phone to pull up her reservation confirmation. "I'm a guest here. I have a reservation." Karen's face twisted into a sneer. "We don't have any reservations under your name, and I know all of our current bookings. Now, please leave before I'm forced to call security." Maya took a deep breath, drawing on years of experience handling high-pressure situations in the operating room. She maintained her professional composure, though her heart was beginning to race. "My name is Dr. Maya Richardson. I'm the keynote speaker for the medical conference tomorrow. If you could just check your system." "I don't need to check anything," Karen interrupted, her voice getting louder. "I know who our guests are, and you're not one of them. This isn't the kind of establishment for people like you." The racist implication hung heavy in the air. Maya could see other guests shifting uncomfortably, some pulling out their phones to record the situation. A young couple at the coffee shop nearby whispered to each other, their eyes wide with concern. Maya reached into her purse, intending to show Karen the email confirmation on her phone. Her fingers brushed against the presidential suite keycard that had been courier delivered to her office last week, but she wanted to handle this professionally first. "Ms. Whitmore," Maya said, her voice steady but firm, "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm a paying guest at this hotel. If you could simply check the reservation system." Karen stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space. The manager's face was now red with anger, and she jabbed her finger toward the door. "I told you to leave. We don't want your kind causing trouble here. This is a prestigious hotel, not some roadside motel." Maya stood her ground, years of dealing with discrimination in the medical field having taught her to remain dignified in the face of ignorance. She was about to respond when Karen suddenly reached out and slapped Maya's phone from her hand, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound of the phone hitting the marble echoed through the now silent lobby, marking the moment when this encounter was about to take an unexpected turn. The sound of Maya's phone hitting the marble floor seemed to freeze time in the grand lobby. Hotel guests gasped, and several more people pulled out their phones to record the unfolding scene. Maya stared at her cracked phone screen, then slowly raised her eyes to meet Karen's triumphant smirk. "Now look what you made me do," Karen said loudly, playing to her audience. "This is exactly the kind of trouble I was trying to prevent." She turned to the growing crowd of onlookers. "Everyone, Please don't worry. Security will handle this situation. Maya bent down to pick up her damaged phone, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from controlled anger. As she straightened up, she noticed a young black family quickly checking out at the far end of the counter, their children watching the scene with wide, uncomfortable eyes. The mother was hurriedly ushering them away, a familiar look of, "This could have been us," written across her face. Two security guards approached from different directions. One was a tall, muscular man named Steve, according to his name tag, and the other was a shorter man called Mike. They moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves on either side of Maya. "Ma'am," Steve said, his tone professional but firm, "we need you to come with us." Maya held her ground, speaking clearly so the recording phones could pick up her words. "I am a paying guest at this hotel. This woman assaulted me and damaged my property. I want to speak to the general manager immediately." Karen let out a theatrical laugh. "Oh, now you're lying about being assaulted. I barely touched your phone, and we both know you can't afford to stay here." She turned to the security guards. "She's been harassing our guests and refusing to leave. Remove her now." A middle-aged white couple stepped forward from the crowd. The woman spoke up, "We saw everything." The manager hid her phone unprovoked. "This is completely unacceptable." Karen's face flushed darker. "This doesn't concern you. Please enjoy your evening." She turned back to the guards. "Remove her now, or I'll call the police." Steve reached for Maya's arm, but she took a step back. "Do not touch me," she said firmly. "I am Dr. Maya Richardson, Chief of Neurosurgery at Chicago Memorial Hospital and tomorrow's keynote speaker at the International Neurosurgery Conference. Your manager has assaulted me and is discriminating against me based on my race." Mike, the shorter guard, hesitated. He'd seen the conference preparations and something clicked in his mind. "Ms. Whitmore, maybe we should check the system first." "I don't need to check anything," Karen snapped. "I know every VIP guest in this hotel, and she is not one of them. If she were really some important doctor, she wouldn't be dressed like that." More phones were recording now. An older man in an expensive suit stepped forward. "I'm an attorney, and I'm witnessing clear discrimination. Young lady," he addressed Maya, "I'll be happy to provide my card as a witness." Karen's composure began to crack. She hadn't expected so many guests to side with Maya. "Security, I'm ordering you to remove this woman now. She is trespassing." Steve moved to take Maya's arm again, but she raised her hand to stop him. The lobby had grown completely silent, every eye fixed on the scene. Maya could hear her heart pounding in her ears, could feel the familiar weight of racism pressing down on her shoulders. But she also felt something else, the support of strangers who were willing to stand up against injustice. "Ms. Whitmore," Maya said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby. "You've assaulted me, damaged my property, and humiliated me in front of dozens of witnesses. You've made assumptions about me based solely on my appearance and race. You've refused to perform the basic function of your job by checking the reservation system. And now you're about to learn a very expensive lesson about the dangers of prejudice." Maya reached into her purse, her hand brushing past the cracked phone and grabbing something else instead. Karen's face was a mask of rage and superiority, completely unaware that her entire world was about to shift dramatically in the next few seconds. The tension in the lobby was electric as Maya's hand emerged from her purse, holding something that would change everything, not just for Karen, but for the entire hotel chain. In one smooth motion, Maya pulled out the presidential suite keycard from her purse. The distinctive gold trim and special VIP emblem caught the light from the chandelier above. She held it up silently, letting the card speak for itself. Karen's face went through a series of rapid changes, from smug satisfaction to confusion, then to dawning horror as she recognized the exclusive keycard that only the hotel's most prestigious guests received. The presidential suite keycard was impossible to fake or duplicate, and only a handful were issued each month. That's not possible," Karen stammered, her voice barely a whisper now. The lobby remained deathly quiet, with only the soft sounds of phone cameras still recording. "Where did you get that?" "The hotel's corporate office had it delivered to my hospital office last week," Maya replied calmly, "along with a very nice welcome letter from your CEO, thanking me for choosing Grand Plaza for my stay during the conference." Steve and Mike, the security guards, immediately stepped back, They knew what that gold card meant. Its holder had more authority in the hotel than anyone except the general manager and corporate executives. A young desk clerk, who had been watching everything unfold, suddenly spoke up. "Ms. Whitmore, Dr. Richardson's reservation is right here in the system. The presidential suite was booked 3 months ago by the conference organizers. There's even a note from Mr. Harrison himself." The color drained from Karen's face. Mr. Harrison was the hotel's general manager, and a direct note from him meant this guest was a top priority. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I believe," Maya continued, her voice steady and clear, "that this suite costs more per night than your monthly salary, Ms. Whitmore. Not that money should determine how any guest is treated in this establishment." The attorney who had spoken up earlier let out a low whistle. Several guests began applauding, while others shook their heads in disgust at Karen's behavior. The young black family who had tried to leave earlier stopped to watch justice unfold. A commotion near the elevator caught everyone's attention. James Harrison, the hotel's general manager, was rushing toward the scene. His face showed he already knew exactly who Maya was and what had just happened in his lobby. "Dr. Richardson," he said, slightly out of breath, "I cannot begin to express my deepest apologies for this inexcusable incident. I was in a meeting when security alerted me." He turned to Karen, his expression hardening. "Ms. Whitmore, you are suspended effective immediately. Please surrender your hotel credentials to security and leave the premises." Karen's face crumpled. "But Mr. Harrison, I was just trying to protect." "Protect what?" Maya interrupted, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the entire lobby. "Protect this establishment from a black woman in casual clothes. I'm curious, how many other guests did you physically assault today while protecting this hotel?" The general manager's face went pale at the word assault. "Physical assault. Miss Whitmore, what did you do?" "She slapped my phone out of my hand when I tried to show her my reservation," Maya explained, holding up her cracked phone as evidence. "But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that none of this would have happened if your front desk manager hadn't made assumptions based on the color of my skin." The crowd murmured in agreement. Several guests stepped forward, offering to email their videos of the incident. The attorney who had spoken up earlier was already writing his contact information on a business card. Karen stood frozen, watching as her career crumbled around her. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that she seemed to physically shrink under the weight of her actions. Mr. Harrison turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this disgraceful display of discrimination in our hotel. I assure you that Grand Plaza has zero tolerance for this behavior, and appropriate actions will be taken." But Maya wasn't finished. She had one more thing to say, something that would transform this horrible experience into lasting change, not just for this hotel, but for the entire chain. She took a deep breath, ready to turn this moment of discrimination into an opportunity for real institutional change. Maya turned to face Mr. Harrison, her voice calm but resolute. "Zero-tolerance policies are meaningless without action, Mr. Harrison. I'd like to know exactly what steps you plan to take beyond suspending one employee." The general manager shifted uncomfortably under the gaze of dozens of guests, all still recording. Before he could respond, Karen made one last desperate attempt to save herself. "Dr. Richardson, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I have children to support. I've worked here for 15 years. I didn't mean to." "To what?" Maya interrupted. "To assume I was homeless. To assault me. To humiliate me in front of all these people." She gestured to the lobby full of witnesses. "How many other people of color have you treated this way when there weren't cameras recording?" The young black family who had stayed to watch stepped forward. The mother spoke up. "We saw her do something similar last month to my brother when he came to meet us for dinner. We complained, but nothing was done." More voices joined in from the crowd. A Hispanic businessman mentioned being questioned repeatedly about his reservation. An Indian couple described being directed to a lower-cost hotel down the street despite having confirmed bookings. Mr. Harrison's face grew increasingly pale as more stories emerged. What had seemed like an isolated incident was rapidly revealing itself to be a pattern. The attorney in the crowd was now taking notes. "Dr. Richardson," Mr. Harrison said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Please, let's discuss this in my office. We'll have your phone replaced immediately. And of course, your entire stay will be complimentary. Maya shook her head. This isn't about free hotels or replacement phones, Mr. Harrison. This is about dignity. This is about every person who walks through those doors being treated with basic human respect. She turned to address the crowd, her natural leadership abilities shining through. How many of you were going to just stand there and watch while I was removed from this lobby? The silence that followed was deafening. That's part of the problem, too. Karen had begun crying quietly, but no one moved to comfort her. The security guards looked ashamed, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Mr. Harrison, Maya continued, I'm scheduled to give a keynote speech tomorrow about innovations in neurosurgery. But perhaps I should change my topic to discuss another type of surgery, the kind needed to remove the cancer of systemic racism from prestigious institutions like this one. The crowd murmured in agreement. Several people were nodding, and the number of recording phones had only increased. Here's what's going to happen, Maya said firmly. I will stay in your hotel tonight because I have a responsibility to the medical conference. But I expect to see immediate changes. I want a detailed plan by tomorrow morning outlining how you will address this issue, including mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, clear reporting procedures for discrimination, and concrete consequences for violations. Mr. Harrison nodded quickly. Of course, Dr. Richardson, I'll have that for you first thing. I'm not finished. Maya held up her hand. I also want to see diversity initiatives in your hiring practices, particularly in management positions. And I want quarterly reports on your progress sent to both the conference organizers and my office. Karen, who had been trying to quietly slip away, was stopped by security. The young desk clerk who had found Maya's reservation was already printing out incident reports. And Ms. Whitmore, Maya turned to face her one last time. I hope you use this experience to reflect on your prejudices. Your children deserve to grow up in a world better than the one you tried to perpetuate today. The lobby erupted in applause. The attorney stepped forward, handing Maya his card. Dr. Richardson, I specialize in discrimination cases. What happened here today needs to be addressed at a corporate level. I'd be honored to help. Maya took his card, knowing that this incident would have repercussions far beyond this single hotel or this single day. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for change, but the real work was just beginning. Mr. Harrison, looking both chastened and nervous, gestured toward the elevator. Dr. Richardson, please allow me to escort you to your suite. We have much to discuss. The elevator ride to the presidential suite was thick with tension. Mr. Harrison kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief while Maya stood calmly, her damaged phone still in her hand. As they ascended to the top floor, she could see the city lights spreading out through the glass elevator walls. Dr. Richardson, Mr. Harrison began, I've been general manager here for 8 years, and I've never been more ashamed of what happened in our lobby tonight. I want you to know that I personally hired Ms. Whitmore, and I never saw any signs off. That's part of the problem, Maya interrupted. You never saw the signs because you weren't looking for them. How many complaints about her have been dismissed? How many guests of color chose to stay silent because they didn't think anyone would listen? The elevator doors opened to reveal a private hallway decorated with elegant artwork. A single set of double doors marked the entrance to the presidential suite. As Mr. Harrison fumbled with a master key, Maya's phone buzzed with notifications. The videos from the lobby were already spreading across social media. Inside the suite, Maya took in the luxurious surroundings. A massive living room with floor-to-ceiling windows, a dining room that could seat 12, and a master bedroom larger than her first apartment. But instead of feeling pleased, she felt tired. The kind of bone-deep tired that came from fighting the same battles year after year. The corporate office is already calling, Mr. Harrison said, checking his own phone. They've seen the videos. Our CDO wants to speak with you personally. Maya sat down on one of the plush sofas. Good, because this isn't over. That scene downstairs, that was just a symptom of a much bigger problem. A knock at the suite's door interrupted them. It was Mike, one of the security guards from earlier, holding Maya's suitcase. His hands were shaking slightly as he wheeled it in. Dr. Richardson, he said, his voice quiet. I wanted to apologize. I should have checked the system myself instead of just following Ms. Whitmore's orders. I've worked here 3 years, and... He paused, gathering courage. And this isn't the first time I've seen her treat people differently based on their race. Maya studied him carefully. And you never reported it. Mike looked at the floor. I was afraid of losing my job. I have a family too. Fear keeps the system running, Maya said. Your silence protected her, not your family. She turned to Mr. Harrison. This is what needs to change. You need employees who feel safe reporting discrimination, and you need managers who take those reports seriously. Mr. Harrison's phone buzzed again. The CEO wants to know if you'll accept a private jet to take you home after the conference, and are offering to upgrade all your future stays to presidential suites at any of our hotels worldwide. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. They think they can solve racism with luxury perks? This isn't about me getting special treatment after being humiliated. This is about making sure no one else gets humiliated in the first place. She stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Karen was probably heading home to her children, maybe finally confronting her own biases. The young black family was perhaps telling their friends about what they witnessed. The attorney was likely already drafting documents. Mr. Harrison, Maya said, still looking at the city lights, I want a meeting with your CEO tomorrow after my keynote speech. Not over the phone, in person, and I want every hotel manager in your chain to attend via video conference. We're going to have a real conversation about institutional change. She turned back to face them. Both men could see the determination in her eyes. This wasn't just about one bad night or one racist employee. This was about using her position and power to force real change. And Mike, she added, I want you in that meeting too. It's time for people to start speaking up. The security guard nodded, standing a little straighter. Mr. Harrison was already making calls to arrange the meeting, and Maya's phone kept buzzing with messages from colleagues, friends, and reporters, all wanting to know more about what happened at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was this story. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways that would reach far beyond these luxury hotel walls. The next morning, Maya stood at the podium in the hotel's grand ballroom, facing hundreds of medical professionals who had gathered for her keynote speech. News of the previous night's incident had spread rapidly through social media, and the conference organizers had to add extra chairs to accommodate all the attendees. She looked down at her prepared speech about advances in neurosurgery, then set it aside. The room fell silent, everyone waiting to hear what she would say. I had planned to talk about brain surgery today, she began, her voice clear and strong. But last night, in this very hotel, I experienced a different kind of operation, one that exposed a tumor of racism that's been growing unchecked in our society. The audience leaned forward, many recording on their phones. In the back of the room, she could see Mr. Harrison and several corporate executives who had flown in early that morning. The CEO himself sat in the front row, having arrived by private jet just an hour earlier. As a neurosurgeon, I know that removing a tumor isn't enough. You have to prevent it from coming back. You need follow-up treatment, monitoring, and systemic changes. She paused, letting her words sink in. The same is true for addressing racism in our institutions. Maya then shared the full story of what happened in the lobby. She described Karen's actions, the bystanders who eventually spoke up, and the others who came forward with their own experiences of discrimination at the hotel. But this isn't just about one hotel or one incident, she continued. How many of you have been treated differently in professional settings because of your race? Dozens of hands went up. How many have stayed silent to protect your careers? More hands rose. The CEO shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Maya detailed her demands for change. She outlined a comprehensive plan, mandatory anti-bias training, diverse hiring practices, clear reporting procedures, and regular audits of customer complaints. And here's the thing about surgery, she said, building to her conclusion. It requires precision, patience, and most importantly, courage. The courage to cut out what's harmful, even when it's deeply embedded in the system. Just then, the ballroom doors opened. Mike, the security guard, walked in, still in his uniform. Maya had specifically requested his presence. The CEO turned to look at him, then back at Maya, understanding the message. Change had to include voices from all levels. Last night, a hotel manager saw my race before she saw my credentials, Maya said. She saw my casual clothes before she saw my humanity. What happened next is important. People spoke up. Change began. And now, we have a choice about what happens next. She looked directly at the CEO. Your hotel chain has an opportunity to lead by example, to show that luxury and equality aren't mutually exclusive. That excellence in service means excellence in treating all people with dignity. The room erupted in applause. Medical professionals of all races and backgrounds stood, showing their support. Some were wiping tears from their eyes, recognizing their own experiences in Maya's words. The CEO stood up and walked to the podium. Without hesitation, he took the microphone. Dr. Richardson, he said, his voice carrying across the silent room, you're absolutely right. We've been performing surface treatments when we needed deep surgery. On behalf of our entire organization, I commit to implementing every point in your plan, starting today. He turned to face the audience. And we're going beyond that. We're establishing a permanent oversight committee for diversity and inclusion, and I want Dr. Richardson to chair it. We're not just going to change our policies, we're going to change our culture. Maya nodded, accepting the role but knowing the real work was just beginning. In the back of the room, Mike stood a little taller, knowing he would be part of that change. As the applause continued, Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. The video of last night had gone viral, and other hotel chains were already announcing reviews of their own policies. What had started as one woman's humiliation was transforming into a movement for institutional change. The CEO was still speaking, outlining immediate actions the hotel would take. But Maya was already thinking ahead, planning her next steps, because like any good surgeon, she knew that the follow-up care was just as important as the initial operation. 3 months after the incident, Maya sat in her office at Chicago Memorial Hospital, reviewing the first quarterly report from the Grand Plaza Hotel chain. The changes had been swift and significant, far beyond what she had initially hoped for. On her desk lay a newspaper with the headline, Hotel Chains Transformation Sparks Industry-Wide Revolution in Anti-Discrimination Policies. Next to it was a framed photo from the new diversity training program, where she spotted Mike, the security guard, now promoted to Director of Security Operations and Inclusion Training. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Mr. Harrison. Dr. Richardson, you'll be pleased to know that our hiring statistics for this quarter show a 60% increase in minority management positions. The Oversight Committee meeting is scheduled for next week. As she read through the report, there was a knock at her door. A young black medical student entered, clutching a tablet with trembling hands. Dr. Richardson, she said nervously, I'm Sarah Williams, your new intern. I just wanted to say, the video of what you did at that hotel, it's why I chose this hospital for my internship. You showed us that we don't have to accept discrimination anywhere, even in the most prestigious places. Maya smiled, remembering her own days as an intern, how many times she'd had to prove herself twice over. Sit down, Sarah. Let me tell you what happened after that video went viral. She described how the hotel chain had not only implemented all their suggested changes but had gone further. They had hired Karen Whitmore's replacement, a talented black woman who had previously been overlooked for promotion. They had established a scholarship program for minority students in hospitality management. Even the presidential suite where everything had started had been renamed the Dignity Suite, with a portion of its revenue going to civil rights organizations. But the most surprising change, Maya told Sarah, came from Karen Whitmore herself. 2 weeks after the incident, Karen had reached out through her therapist, asking to meet. In a small coffee shop, away from cameras and social media, she had broken down crying, confronting her own biases for the first time. She's now working with anti-racism organizations, Maya explained, sharing her story as an example of how unconscious bias can poison even those who don't think they're racist. She's doing the hard work of changing herself. Sarah listened intently as Maya pulled up recent statistics on her computer. The hotel chain's new policies had been adopted by 5 other major hospitality groups. Complaints of racial discrimination had dropped by 40% across their properties. Guest satisfaction scores for people of color had risen to match those of white guests. But here's what really matters, Maya said, turning to her intern. It's not just about hotels. It's about every space where people like us are made to feel we don't belong, whether it's a hospital, a boardroom, or a luxury hotel. Just then, Maya's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Mike. sharing photos from the latest training session. In one image, she spotted the young black family from that night, now regular guests at the hotel, participating in a panel discussion about creating welcoming spaces. You know what the best part is? Maya asked Sarah. The change isn't just on paper, it's in people's minds and hearts. Last week, I went back to that hotel. The same lobby where I was almost thrown out now has a diversity statement prominently displayed. But more importantly, I watched how they treated every guest who walked through those doors with the same respect, the same warmth, regardless of their appearance or race. Sarah straightened in her chair, absorbing everything. So what's next, Dr. Richardson? Maya smiled, picking up a letter from her desk. Well, I've been invited to speak at a national hotel industry convention. They want to know how to implement similar changes across the entire hospitality sector. She passed the letter to Sarah. Would you like to help me prepare that presentation? As her intern eagerly nodded, Maya felt a sense of satisfaction. The humiliation she'd experienced that night had been transformed into something powerful, a catalyst for real change. And sitting across from this bright-eyed medical student, she knew the ripples would continue to spread, one person, one institution at a time. The next generation would have different battles to fight, but hopefully they would fight them in a world more ready to listen and change. 1 year to the day after the incident, Maya stood once again in the Grand Plaza Hotel's lobby. But this time, everything was different. The space was filled with journalists, hotel executives, civil rights leaders, and guests gathered for a special ceremony. The hotel's massive crystal chandelier sparkled above a new installation, a wall-mounted plaque titled The Richardson Protocol, outlining the comprehensive anti-discrimination policies now adopted by hotels worldwide. Beside it hung photos showing the diverse staff who now manage the property, including familiar faces like Mike, who beamed proudly in his executive uniform. Dr. Richardson, a young reporter asked, "Did you ever imagine that being discriminated against in this lobby would lead to industry-wide change?" Maya thought carefully before answering. Sometimes, the worst moments in our lives become catalysts for the best changes. This isn't just about one incident or one hotel anymore. It's about setting a new standard for how all people deserve to be treated. The crowd parted as Karen Whitmore approached the podium. She looked different now, humbler, more aware. She had spent the past year working with civil rights organizations, sharing her story as a warning about the dangers of unchecked bias. "A year ago, I was the face of everything wrong with this industry," Karen began, her voice trembling. "Today, I want to be an example of how people can change, learn, and grow." Dr. Richardson didn't just expose discrimination that night. She gave people like me a chance to confront our biases and do better. The hotel's CEO stepped forward next, unveiling statistics that showed the impact of the Richardson Protocol across their properties. A 70% increase in minority management positions, zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior, and the highest guest satisfaction scores in the company's history. Sarah, Maya's former intern now in her residency, stood in the crowd recording everything on her phone. Beside her was the black family from that first night, their children now junior ambassadors in the hotel's youth diversity program. But perhaps the most meaningful change, the CEO continued, isn't in our statistics. It's in the stories we no longer hear, of guests being judged by their appearance, of employees afraid to report discrimination, of talents overlooked because of race. Maya watched as Mike took the stage to announce the hotel's new scholarship program for minority students in hospitality management. The security guard who had once almost removed her from the lobby was now teaching others how to create truly welcoming spaces. "Dr. Richardson," Mike said, turning to face her, "you showed us that true luxury isn't just about expensive suites and fancy amenities. It's about treating every person with dignity and respect." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a new tradition. Every guest checking into the presidential suite, now officially renamed the Dignity Suite, would receive a card sharing the story of that night and the changes it inspired. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya noticed a young black girl, 12 years old, hanging back shyly with her parents. She approached them with a warm smile. "Dr. Richardson," the girl said softly, "I want to be a doctor like you when I grow up. Not just because you're a great surgeon, but because you stand up for what's right." Maya knelt down to the girl's level. "You know what? Being a good doctor isn't just about medical skills. It's about seeing the humanity in every person and fighting for their dignity. Whether it's in a hospital or a hotel, that's what really matters. Later that evening, Maya returned to her office at the hospital, where a frame on her wall now held her cracked phone from that night. A reminder that sometimes breaking things leads to building something better. She opened her laptop to find emails from hotel chains across the globe, asking for guidance on implementing the Richardson Protocol. There were invitations to speak at conferences, consult with corporations, and share her story with new audiences. But what made her smile most was a simple message from the young girl she'd met earlier, sent through her parents. "Thank you for making the world a little bit better for people like me." Maya looked out her office window at the city lights, thinking about how one moment of discrimination had sparked a movement for change. The work wasn't finished. It never would be. But the path forward was clearer now, marked by the footsteps of those who dared to stand up and speak out.